day and welcome to Alena Media TV. We are broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. I am Elsa Abraham, and in this episode we are bringing you African news. Here is your headlines. US directly presses Ethiopia to withdraw forces from Tigray. Sudan launches diplomatic campaign over border dispute with Ethiopia. Ethiopia's domestic problems risk becoming international. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to our news in details. Welcome back from that short break. Now, the United States says it has directly pressed senior levels of Eritrea's government to immediately withdraw its troops from neighboring Ethiopia, where witnesses have described them looting and hunting down civilians in the embattled Tigray region. The United States says it has directly pressed senior levels of Eritrea government to immediately withdraw its troops from neighboring Ethiopia. A State Department spokesperson in an email to the Associated Press on Thursday said Washington has conveyed grave concerns about credible reports of abuses. There were no details on how officials with Eritrea, one of the world's most secretive countries, responded. Eritrea has said little publicly about the conflict in Tigray as Ethiopian soldiers fight forces loyal to the new fugitive Tigray regional leaders who once dominated Ethiopia's government for nearly 3 decades. The Tigray leaders were marginalized after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office in 2018, and each side regards the other as illegitimate. Ethiopia has repeatedly denied the presence of Eritrean soldiers, who some witnesses have estimated in the thousands. Now concerns are growing that the Eritrean forces refuse to leave. Eritrea remains an enemy of the fugitive Tigray leaders after a 2-decade border war that ended under Abiy Ahmed. Eritrea's information ministry on Thursday published a statement by the country's embassy in the US, responding to an open letter this week by former US ambassadors of Ethiopia that expressed concern about the Tigray conflict and Eritrea's involvement. The allusion by these ambassadors to potential territorial war between Eritrea and Ethiopia can only be disingenuous in content and vicious in intent, Eritrea's statement said, expressing profound dismay at their provocative and ill-intentioned swipe. The Tigray region remains largely cut off from the outside world, and Ethiopia has blocked almost all journalists from entering, complicating efforts to verify assertions by the warring sides. Meanwhile, humanitarian workers have had limited access to estimated 6 million people in Tigray as food and other supplies run short and concerns about starvation grow. The situation is deteriorating every day, every minute, the president of the Ethiopian Red Cross Society, Ato Abera Tola, told reporters on Thursday as Red Cross entities appealed for more financial support. There is no area which is not affected by this conflict. The conflict is everywhere, he said. The Ethiopian head of delegation for International Committee for the Red Cross, Katia Sorin, said they still had not been able to reach rural areas of Tigray, a largely agricultural region. The ICRC is one of the few international organizations to maintain its operations in Tigray after fighting began. We are helping, but it's a drop in the ocean of need, Sorin said. Now moving on to our second story for today, Sudan launches diplomatic campaign over border dispute with Ethiopia. Sudan launched a diplomatic campaign to rally support in its border dispute with Ethiopia, sending senior envoys to Saudi Arabia and South Africa. The drive, which began in South Africa on Tuesday, is the latest development in the worsening tussles between the two African nations. Sudan is massing troops on its border with Ethiopia to regain control of areas on its land that have long been settled by farmers from its neighbors, powerful Amara group, which are backed by militias. Andrew Young, deputy of the U.S. Africa Command Commander for Civil Military Engagement, meets with Minister of Defense Major Yassin Ibrahim Yassin. AFRICOM U.S. military delegation concludes on a historic visit to Sudan. Sudan has vowed to protect Sudanese territory to the last man and to wrest back control of border areas still held by the farmers. Ethiopia warned Sudan that its patience was running out and accused its neighbor of infiltrating its territory. A Sudanese border patrol came under mortar fire from Ethiopia troops this week. The patrol, which returned fire, did not suffer any casualties in the incident late on Sunday night. This month, 5 Sudanese women and a child were killed by suspected Ethiopian militia near the border. 2 more women have been missing since the attack. Ethiopian Foreign Ministry spokesman Dina Mufti said Addis Ababa was prepared to negotiate over the border dispute if Sudanese forces withdrew from the areas they retook since December, a condition Khartoum is certain to reject. Sudan and Ethiopia have long had flare-ups on the border, which was demarcated in a 1902 agreement reaffirmed in 1972. The two nations are bound by deep cultural and social links, but each has for decades supported rebels fighting the other's government in the second half of the 20th century. Sudan's diplomatic campaign is designed to increase pressure on Ethiopia to negotiate a settlement. Khartoum has also wants to portray Addis Ababa as intransigent in a decade of negotiations over a hydroelectric Nile dam being built by Ethiopia. Sudan wants Ethiopia to include it in operations of the dam to avoid flooding and the disruptions of its own power generation dams on the Blue Nile. Ethiopia, on the other hand, refuses to enter a legal binding agreement, saying it was willing only to accept recommendations. As part of the diplomatic drive, Mohamed Al-Faki, a civilian member of Sudan's 11-member Sovereignty Council, flew to Saudi Arabia to brief leaders on the border dispute. With him were the head of Sudan's intelligence service, Gamal Abdel Megoud, and religious affairs minister, Nasreddin Abdel Megoud. Another civilian member of the council, Mohamed Al-Taishi, visited South Africa on Tuesday and was in Kenya on Wednesday on the same mission. Traveling with him was acting Foreign Minister Omar Al-Din. South Africa is the current chair of the African Union. It hands over leadership of the group to the Democratic Republic of Congo next month. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the head of Sudan's Sovereignty Council and de facto head of state, is scheduling to visit Kuwait and the UAE early in February. His deputy general Mohammed Dagalo is expected to visit Qatar after about the same time, the council said. The Sovereignty Council, made up of 5 generals and 6 civilians, was created in 2019. It is part of a power-sharing deal between the generals who ousted dictator Omar al-Bashir and the pro-democracy movement that held months of street protests, leading to his removal in April 2019. And in our last story for today, Ethiopia's domestic problems risk becoming international. In Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, coverage of negotiations around the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has tended to consistently be in the news over the past few years. The events of the last few weeks, however, have easily pushed JED talks to the side. On November 4th, 2020, Ethiopian federal government forces started pounding the Tigray region, one of 10 simultaneous regions in the country, after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed accused the Tigray People's Liberation Front of attacking a federal base. Relations had been disintegrating after Abiy cancelled elections due to COVID that would have marked the end of his term, while most of Ethiopia's ethnic minorities took umbrage. The TPLF went a step further by holding their own elections, the results of which were declared null and void by the federal government. While it was not possible to verify the claim about the attack, there is no doubt about what the TPLF did next. The TPLF proceeded to take over the headquarters of the Federal Military's Northern Command, located near its own base, imprisoning those soldiers who did not join them. While Tigrayans constitute only 6% of Ethiopia's population, the TPLF was able to rule Ethiopia with an iron fist for 20 years before being turfed out by power when Abiy took office. Since the takeover of the military base, the situation in Ethiopia has threatened to spiral out of control. Abiy has called the conflict a domestic law enforcement operation and has refused to engage in any negotiations with the TPLF. Their leadership is allegedly being hunted down. Former Foreign Minister Siyom Mesfin was killed last week in a shootout, according to the government. However, there are reports accompanied by photographs of the dead man with a bullet wound in his forehead that he was similarly executed. It has not helped that the domestic law enforcement operation is being aided by Eritrean troops. Eritrea has its own acrimonious history with the Tigray, and there have been reports of Eritrean refugees who fled into Ethiopia being forced back across the border to uncertain futures. The involvement of Eritrean troops, though denied by the Ethiopian and the Eritrean government, is inching the potential for regional conflict upwards. Abiy's spokeswoman, Bilene Seyom, released a statement saying the government is engaged in the stabilization mission for a month now, while it continues to bring to justice perpetrators. However, it has been approximately 11 weeks and the cost is mounting. There have been accusations of human rights abuses. Aid workers have largely been kept out of the area by the federal government, but those who have been granted entry have described abuses such as looted and burned refugee camps and a potentially disastrous mass starvation scenario. There are few signs that Ethiopia's international politics, a heady constructing mix of nationalism and ethnic aggressions, are tamping down. The violence is a sign of domestic fissures rather than of the strength of the federal government or by Abiy himself. Recent developments might make it even more difficult for him to maintain the patchwork of alliances necessary to keep him at the top, following the dismissal by the country's federal high court of the majority of the charges against Oromo Federalist Congress leaders Jawar Mohammed and Bekele Gebra. Ethiopian politics are highly complicated. Even ethnicities have their own factions. In this case, this result is likely to frustrate the Oromo Democratic Party, traditionally Abiy supporters, and might affect his stances in the upcoming summer elections. This is where we end today's episode on African News. Make sure you like, share, comment. Let us know your thoughts on this particular episode. Thanks for watching.